Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I wanted to just kind of talk about video games a little bit, okay? I have a lot of positivity, alright? So apparently Xbox just gave up, and last night I saw that apparently the next Xbox is literally just gonna be a PC. And to be real with you, this could be a negative point, but honestly, I think it's kind of cool. I think it's great. I've actually been talking about this whole situation for years now, okay? What Xbox should do. You know, at this point, just to let people use this thing as a PC, right? Like, let me split up the goddamn system in half, digitally of course, and install Windows and just use it like a gaming PC, all right? I honestly think for the price tag right there, okay, this might be one of the best little like mid-range gaming computers you can buy, okay? That would be pretty goddamn cool. Now, obviously this is the next Xbox, and there's been a lot of murmurs by like all these companies, like Sony is talking about that PlayStation 6, and I just don't even know if like this generation of gaming was honestly that worth it. If it really feels like a fart in the wind. But let's just get all the positivity out of the way real quickly. Okay, let's focus on that right now. Okay, I really want to, because there's a lot of good stuff to say. So obviously one of the important things in this like minute 17 clip that was posted yesterday, there's like two things I want to dig out, two really important points. So first off, right here.
You, an Xbox experience, not locked to a single store or tied to one device.
Whoa, not tied to a single store? Now, one of the big things for like gaming consoles is like you're really just tied to one platform. Even for smartphones like the iPhone, it's like as long as you can only use the App Store, Apple's happy. When you're on a PlayStation, the only place you can buy a game from is Sony. When you're on Nintendo, the only place you can buy from is, you guessed it, Nintendo. And Xbox, I guess, was roughly the same thing. Except until today. The next generation of Xbox does not apparently lock you into one store. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that, whoa, does that mean they're going to let you install Steam on the next Xbox? Epic Games Launcher? Are they going to let you play with Ubisoft Connect, God forbid? I don't even know if that's entirely the case, and I don't even know how they would do that. What, are they going to, like, have a Steam store that you can load onto your Xbox, open that up, and then it launches, like, the Steam OS? Does it launch, like, the Steam Deck interface and let you play around with your Steam games? Is that the possibility? Are they going to let you do that with Epic Games? Or is it like what I mentioned in the beginning? Are they just literally going to let you split the Xbox up and use Windows 11 straight on the box, okay? Just like a regular PC, which they absolutely could. I've talked about it in the past, and if that's the route Xbox wants to take, then I think it's actually not a bad idea, all right? Given the fact that Xbox systems really don't sell as well as like your PlayStations or your Nintendos, and I think Microsoft has kind of proven that you can basically buy every single game company under the sun as much as you legally can, but it's not really going to do a lot to drag people into your system if there's no reason to buy the system. Now, to be real with you, the question is, should you buy the next Xbox? And the honest answer to that is there a reason to buy an Xbox at this point? Because the reality is, like, I have not stopped playing games from Xbox. One of my favorite games, I think, like, this year has probably been the Indiana Jones game that I played. I think it was probably one of the best games that I've actually played from Xbox. It was an amazing single-player experience. And I played it all through Game Pass. You know, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, right? They remastered Oblivion. I thought that was a pretty fucking good time. You know what? I never installed that on my Xbox, never even bothered to waste my time there. You know, games like Starfield, I played entirely on the PC. So it's not that I don't play shit from Xbox. I think all of us kind of do, right? Depending on what your interest is. I played through Black Ops 6's campaign entirely on PC Game Pass. So much like Xbox, you know, everything is an Xbox, right? That's the marketing. You know, this is an Xbox. This PSP is an Xbox. This car key fob is an Xbox. This iced tea might be an Xbox. Anything with, I guess, silicon inside it at this point, breast implants excluded, of course, can probably run Xbox games. And I think that's really the route they want to take. Now, the other piece that I found really important in this is when they talked about like emulation or like at least preserving games.
That's why we're working closely with the Windows team to ensure that Windows is the #1 platform for gaming. The next generation of Xbox is coming to life, and this is just the beginning. We can't wait to show you what's next.
So that's a pretty important point. Windows we're going to make sure that's really the focus point, right? You know, it's the first time I've been looking at Xbox and Windows is really mentioned like this. And, you know, one of the things that I always thought growing up when I heard Microsoft was associated with the Xbox is like, since the original Xbox, like, can I run Windows XP on the OG Xbox? Could I run Windows Vista on the 360? Could I run Windows 10 or 11 on the current generation Xboxes? And you absolutely can, but I think this is kind of where like Microsoft's next focus point is just sort of unifying everything on the PC front and having like that PC console at your home, right? And I think that's really just the point they're hitting at. Now, obviously, when I think of like emulation and backwards compatibility, I think Xbox is probably like the best preservationist, console, just in terms of how far back you can go. Last night, I loaded up my Xbox One, and it's funny, I looked at all the games that I had installed, and barely any of them were actually current Xbox Series games. I actually was able to play a lot of my old, like, Splinter Cell games underneath the Xbox's, like, emulation, pretty much out of the box. Like, the coziest, simplest way for me to play some of these old 20-year-old classics was just sticking the disc into my actual Xbox Series and just playing them through that. And that, I think, is probably the one cool thing that Microsoft really does that none of the other console guys really give a shit about. Like, could you go all the way back and play like PS1, 2, 3 games with your actual discs on a PlayStation 5? You absolutely can't. You probably have to go through the steps of paying for a subscription to get access to them or just buying them individually on the storefront, which I think in that regard, Microsoft does a pretty good job. There's even a lot of delisted games like Pandora Tomorrow that you can just stick your disc in and download an emulated version within like a matter of minutes. And I think that's some cool shit. Now, when I think about this gaming generation, I wonder do we really even need to talk about the next generation Xbox or the PlayStation 6? I really feel like this generation of gaming is like the biggest fart in the wind gaming generation. You know, typically when you go from like PS1 to PS2, it really felt like, bro, the mouths are moving, the game worlds feel livelier, the open worlds are much more open and livelier, right? When you went from the PS2 to the PS3, you know, you really did feel like, okay, the high definition is really showing, and in some cases, there are games like, I would say, Metal Gear Solid 4 that have held up the test of time. You could crank that shit in a PC emulator, rock that up to 4K, and it would still look like a game released right now. You know, when you went from PS3 to PS4, there was a lot of games that were focusing on that open world, and they implemented gameplay like systems, like the Nemesis system from like the Shadow of Mordor games, or just the worlds were so big that in order to even port them back, you'd have to make pretty much different versions of the game, as you had to do back in the PS2 and Xbox generation, right? Where like Xbox would get like a real Splinter Cell game, and then the PS2 and GameCube would usually get like a fucking neutered version because there were so much technical differences between that stuff. It really feels like with PS5, the only real like game that comes to my mind that really wasn't exclusive is probably like Demon's Souls. Not to say that there aren't other PS5 exclusives, but it feels like going into this generation, a lot of these games could have just easily been made on the PlayStation 4, and in some cases they have. If you don't remember, Jedi Survivor dropped on like, what, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and it was, you know, a genuinely pretty good game. But, you know, it wasn't a game that couldn't have been made on the PS4 because I'm holding a copy of the game. The reason I own this copy is because it's not a mutered physical release. It's actually the whole game on like 2 actual discs, ladies and gentlemen. Unlike the current PlayStation 5 series releases where games are typically like, you know, like halfway done on a disc and you have to download the rest. So what's the point of making the actual physical copy, right? If you're doing these game license key card nonsenses. Now, the other thing that I really have seen about this Xbox system, now obviously, look, I think these systems are fine if like you've never touched a PC, right? Like if you're not a PC gamer, you're probably still going to be blown away, I guess, every generational upgrade. Like, oh, we finally get SSDs. Oh, we finally get ray tracing. Oh, the games are slightly looking a little bit better. But I haven't really seen anything from like a gameplay perspective that's blown my mind away. The only game that honestly, like, it feels like it is even worthy of this generational change that is the PS5 or Xbox Series S and X is maybe like GTA 6, and that's still like a year away, you know? Every single game that I've seen, you know, it feels like just a PS4 game, you know, plus, right? Like with slightly better frame rates, slightly higher resolutions. But on a real note, like if you were to play any of these games and not think about that for a second and just dive into the gameplay, you probably wouldn't give a shit about this one way or the other, right? And that's just sort of the thing that I'm getting out of these game systems. Am I super blown away for the next generation Xbox? No. Will I get this Xbox? Honestly, yeah, if you allow me to actually run Windows on it, because if you get that gimmick sorted out, I'd love to play around with it and show it for a video. But it's one of the reasons why, like, honestly, aside from backwards compatibility, the concept of owning an Xbox anymore just doesn't really hit as hard as it used to back when I was a teenager or even a little kid. Because honestly, without any form of exclusive software to go out and buy this thing at a store, realistically, you're just buying a slightly less locked down PC. So going into the future, now that Xbox, I guess, is opened up and you can install, I guess, other storefronts onto it, I guess that's actually pretty fucking cool. That's actually something really awesome. And I think for a lot of gamers going forward, you know, having the ability to have multiple different storefronts and just have the privilege of just downloading all these places and taking advantage of all these other sales. Maybe, you know, getting a sale from Steam or GOG or Epic Games or even the Xbox store. That is really going to be cool. That's one thing that PC gamers have kind of had as an exclusive for damn near forever. And to see one console, I guess, not be a console anymore and just basically be a PC is interesting. Now, if Microsoft doesn't allow you to get a PC mode and just basically controls what other third-party stores you can go to, then at this point, do you even really need to get the Xbox when, honestly, you could pick yourself up a halfway decent gaming computer, maybe something mid-range, maybe even a little lower end, and take advantage of like that openness that Xbox is trying to sort of like sell you, and then even get access to things like mods or the ability to do like more like intensive content creation on like an actual PC. It's just weird, man. Like it feels like Xbox kind of just gave up being a console. And now they're just embracing being the next PC, right? Whereas now PlayStation and like Nintendo are still like these lockdown platforms. You know, Xbox is like the only one in the entire space now where they're basically selling you a PC with a console mode that you can just stick underneath your television, which for a lot of people is a pretty cool concept. But yeah, Xbox, man. You know, they haven't really given me a reason to own one for years now. But I feel like the market for this are just individuals that will not switch to PC gaming. Maybe they just love the Xbox like simplicity so much that going over to like PC is just not enough. It's just not something they really care about. That's really the only market that makes sense for me. But yeah, Xbox just straight up gave up. And honestly, you know, I think the bigger question for me is, like I said in this video, do we even need the next generation Xbox? Do we even need a PS6? You know, considering the fact that it feels like 95% of the games that have dropped now don't even really take advantage of these systems, at least in my opinion, right? Like GTA 6 is still a year off, and none of the games that are made by any of these big AAA companies feel even close to that level of immersion, that level of technical fidelity. But yeah, I guess that's just where my mind comes into. I really don't see the need for the PS6 or the next generation Xbox, especially since this generation hasn't even felt like it's taken real advantage yet, right? It really feels like we've got maybe a handful of games, maybe like a sequel to a game franchise released like a decade ago. But other than that, it just doesn't feel that this generation hits as hard as it does. And maybe it's because I'm getting older. Maybe it's also because the diminishing returns for these video games are getting lesser and lesser. But yeah, I just want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I had a lot of stuff to say about it. I wanted to get my thoughts out, but hopefully there's like-minded gamers that feel that same way. And if you're somebody that's looking forward to this Xbox because now you get to take advantage of other things, then awesome stuff. That's a really positive goal. Hey man, backwards compatibility, that shit is awesome. 2 thumbs up for that. But as far as Xbox being like, I guess that traditional console, it seems like that ship has long sailed. And I'm not even surprised. I think Xbox killed their console over the last decade, and this is sort of the pivot they have to take in order to keep that market of hardware somewhat relevant, at least in this space. Anyways, I am out.